telephone, and there was equipment there. I mean, the machines were there, but equipment was none. It was, I think, the end of March, beginning of April, everything was. So we sat there and didn't do anything. It was not bad. We come a little bit to rest. How long we were there, no idea of time. Then from Porta Westfalica, we probably went to another one. And then our end was, we ended up in Hamburg, in kind of on the outside of the city of Hamburg. I know the name of the street still too. And some barracks was there. There we were with 4 in a bunk bed. And we had a little piece of bread to be divided into 4 because they didn't have food and we didn't have any food. So it was nothing. We were near the end. If they would have waited 4 or 6 weeks and left us there, we would have all died. That was in April 1945. And we were on the way, on the go from February. 2 months, back and forth. And the conditions. Then we heard the rumor that we were going to Sweden. And I said, what? I didn't even know anymore where Sweden was. We are gone. Yes, it was true. And on the end of April, I think 20, whatever, April, we were put on the train with some old German soldiers. They didn't do whatever, not SS. And they guided us to the border of Denmark and Germany. And they were very sorry that we left. We didn't. They wanted to go with us. Get out. So there in Denmark we were awaited, I think with the queen or the princess, whoever was in power at that time, and the Red Cross was waiting for us.
How many were there in your group?
And it's the same amount of people almost, as far as I know. Maybe one.
So the Phillips group more or less intact.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
As I said, began, and I cannot emphasize, the Phillips saved our lives. And I compare now what I hear from Schindler's List. We were the Phillips group. It was our Schindler's List. When we started to work in a factory in Vught. There's no way, because personally, individually, I would have never made it. Definitely not as a child, a teen, in no way. So then we arrived in Denmark, and the Red Cross was so good and so nice, but what did they know? They gave us the purest cream, and well, it was disaster. And I don't know if somebody died, but we were all very, very, very sick. So then the next day they started to put us on ration. The fact that we came out with another transport of Group 2 later on, independent from us, was some women of Ravensbrück. They had the same deal as we. We were exchanged with German prisoners of war who were still in Sweden. And near the end of the war, they still thought they could win something if they have those old soldiers back. So they said, okay, with a bunch of women, let them get the soldiers back. And Count Volk Bernadotte was instrumental with Himmler to make the deal. I think they made some other deals too, but that was the deal that concerned us. And we were exchanged, and we came into Sweden. That Volk Bernadotte later on, as I said, was killed in King David Hotel in Israel by Eitzel. Then we stayed not long there. We were transported from Copenhagen by train to the boat to go across Sweden. We were ashamed. I was ashamed to sit in that boat. It was, it was like you're starting to be normal again. Maybe, We were treated that way. We had clothes who was full of lice. At that time they managed finally to get it. I was one thing lucky. I had no hair. So no lice could come on my head. Should be grateful for that. Whatever we could get rid of our clothing, we threw in the water when we were our trip to Sweden. We arrived in Sweden and were cleaned and had showered and new clothing. And every day we got some clothing. We were fed very slowly on a diet till our stomachs were were used to it.
Where were you staying at the time?
Also in a kind of a camp in Malmö in Sweden. They treated us very, 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 very well treated. Then we went to another camp near Göteborg in Sweden, and there most of the women recovered. Some women had typhus from the lice, scabies, well, all the kind of things. I had also eczema and all over the place from all. But the funny part was there, not funny part, but the part was there. We had sheets from paper. Sweden was known for paper, so every time we cleaned ourselves with the sheets, we broke the sheets. Then we went in the camp. We started back to a little bit normal life. A group of girls, the ones who put me up on the snow. We got acquainted with a Swedish family who more or less adopted us, and we visited them, and we went to a fair, and we came a little bit back to life. Then I became ill. I had pleurisy in the worst form. My lungs were inundated with water. It was on the border of TB, but I didn't have. So they sent me to a part more in the middle of Sweden, and there I was in a hospital with all the other sick people from the camp. The whole world was there: Hungarian, Romanian, Polish. I learned a smattering of all those languages, and Swedish too. We got food, and then I was aspirated. They aspirated the fluid of my lungs, and as soon as that was done, I felt fine. And I ate and ate. They had 5 times we got fed. I ate for 10 times naturally. But we ate and ate and ate. It was a good time. And it was fine. So I stayed there till I think in August 1945. And most of the women left already for Holland. 3 months we were in Sweden. So we left. They left for Holland, and I was in that hospital. And then I was released from that hospital, and went to another recovery camp. And there also I met the whole world, and I had quite a good time there.
Do you remember the name of the camp?
Yes, ALINGSAS, with a little circle with Swedish on the top. Yes, I have pictures from that there too. Had a very good time. I met people and came a little bit back to life. I stayed there till January 1946. In the meantime, every month I got a little allowance from the Dutch government, a little money, so I had something. Otherwise, money, a room and board was given to me naturally, because where do I have the money from? I stayed in contact sometimes with those people. I knew how to speak, and I knew how to write a childish Swedish, but I knew I could make myself understandable. And there was another family way up in the north who got in contact with me and sent me parcels and wanted me to come and visit them, but I had.
How was it they were contacting you? Was it?
That's something I forgot to. I don't know. Maybe we wrote, or maybe they visited. And they wanted me to visit them, but I had no money, or I couldn't go. I couldn't take the time. Whatever. I was not able to visit them. Life in Sweden at that time was quite nice, but it was different because everything with the traffic was on the here's on the left, the right hand side, whatever. It was opposite here. And it was quite difficult, but it was a good time. I'm glad that we had time, despite my illness too, that I had time to a little bit be a mensch again.
What kind of changes were occurring to make you a mensch? again?
Well, you were treated differently. You got food, you saw, you talked with people, and they treated you like human beings have to be treated, and not being the fear of being killed or being shoved from here to there. Right. And also you had enough food. You could buy anything you wanted, or have everything you wanted in quantities or qualities, whatever. That is a lot. So in January 1946, the Dutch government, by way for consulate, they knew naturally my whereabouts, told me I had to go on the plane. That was the first time I made a plane trip to Holland. That was quite nice. The plane trip was okay the first time. I arrived in Amsterdam, and that was not so nice. There was nobody waiting for me. It was in the evening. And Schiphol at that time naturally was a mess, now still in 46. Not much rebuilt. And, okay. Huh?
Lenny Bromet, please continue.
The arrival on Amsterdam at the airport was of dismal, utter despair and loneliness. There I was standing, I was arriving with some women who are being picked up by relatives, and there was nobody who was picking up me. I stood there in that still, war-destroyed airport, feeling, I don't know, feeling completely black and utterly lost, because then it hit me that there was nobody there to get me, and nobody relative, and why I should actually have returned. I cried so much that there was a taxi driver took pity on me and asked me, where do you want to go? I said, I don't know. So he brought me to a kind of a square there in Amsterdam. And then I remembered the kind woman who supplied supper for us while my mother just died. And I said that it was a horrible thing to go back into the street where I lived and where I was being taken away from. But I had no other choice because I didn't know anyone. So she took me in, was very nice and was very good to me. After a couple of days she said, well, I bring you a contact, you should go to that Jewish organization, Yesat Hayelet. They look after you young people, and you should go there because, and she was right, there is not much that I can do for you. There's one incident from a neighbor which lives beside her and was our next door neighbor too. She was a deeply religious family at that time, but okay. She met me and she said, oh, it's you, it's back. She said, you know, I have a suit from your mother. I took it, and but you're much too big now for it. I don't think it'll fit you. That was a nice religious woman who should think more considerate about that, what she said. There was no thought of that. It was just an incident what hit me there, what she hit me with, you know. Because I know after we were taken out from our house, the neighbors just crawled over the things and stole everything that they could inside. They did it with, that's another story. So then I was in contact with that organization, and they brought me in contact with another into another town where it's a kind of a, how you call it, an orphan. An orphan is now for boys or girls who had no family left. It was in Utrecht, and I was together with 3 other girls. The time spent was not so happy, but there in that way they more or less tried to prepare me for Israel. at that time, or to become a Zionist. Here again, I just followed dutifully rules, didn't have much time or to think of my own individuality or whatever, didn't. Was too much walking in, was being told, like an automaton, like a machine. So the part of my preparation for Israel was to teach me how household work, naturally. And so I was put to work in a family. He was a professor. His daughter was diabetic. I had to weigh the little food. At that time you had to weigh for the diabetic portion of food. I had to clean there, and it was so-called my preparation for Israel. The gist behind it is with the knowledge I know now, when the papers I have when I came back from Holland, I got some papers from my past, that to get all those young people away and go to Israel. They did a job, but we went. All 3 girls, the 4 of us, we all went eventually. So I worked there. Then I went to the a big house in Deventer, another part of Holland. There was a whole group of boys, girls, in preparation for Israel to work. From boys they worked on the farm, other ones did other jobs. We worked in the house, as you women do, and there I met my husband. But then at the time, I don't know what it was, I had to be, they returned me, they sent me back to Utrecht, to that home again with the woman, and I forgot the reason why. I still stayed there, remained there for some time. That was all happening from 1946 till, let's say, January 48, in that time frame. So then finally I went back to the house in Deventer. We lived there together. We fought, we argued, we did. We had lessons, we had shlichim from Israel coming and preparing us and telling us how it was. In the short of the matter, it was not too bad a time. It was not too bad a time. Meantime, I heard that my uncle was alive in Holland, and I visited him. And so I went time was ready to go to Israel. The organization prepared us. We went on Aliyah Beit. It's called Aliyah Beit. It was semi-illegal. Naturally, the English was still in Palestine. At that time, I went with a group in January 1948 to Paris. We remained in Paris for a couple of days in an hotel. Then we went to Marseille. There we went to another camp with the whole world together again, Poles and all the Jews, whoever were ready to go to Israel in what way or another. There was a way for the Exodus. You've heard of the Exodus, to go to Israel? And I flatly refused, because it was meaning on Cyprus and being in a camp again. I said, there's no way that I will do that.
And where were you?
I was in Marseille until for 6 weeks. Till the time was ready, or the ship was found, or whatever the illegal or legal things from the Haganah were ready to do. We went to Haifa, and we arrived there, and the British ones, we had our passport, everything was fine and dandy. I mean, they didn't know that it was semi-legal. Our passports were then given to somebody else, which was not, according to the Dutch government, we weren't allowed to do. We did it, well, whatever. And our passports were used for other people, taking our picture out and put the other pictures in. That's why they got lots and lots of people out. So Haifa arrival was bad, because it was still under English, and there was still shooting, and the Arabs, well, the usual story, it doesn't change too much. So we went then, transported to kibbutz. And there in the kibbutz, we lived there till my husband went into the army. I married in the kibbutz. And he went to the army. The kibbutz was poor at that time. Now it's one of the richest. not too much food. 9 months, 8 months later, I had my first baby. Our daughter was born in the kibbutz Naan, born in the hospital in Rehovot. It was bad time, shooting and being in the ditch for Arab attacks. We were close by Ramli, which was an Arab state, and it was a time I didn't have now needed to go through that again. Then he came out of the army, and we were a short while in the kibbutz. Kibbutz life didn't appeal to me. It was cooperative, it was together, you had no say again. You see, no again to assert or whatever self, nothing. You're told, go there and work there and work there. Okay, that was enough. I didn't take kindly to that anyway. He liked to go into, my husband liked to go into the, with cows and so on. So he had an opportunity to go to another kibbutz, was just being founded, was close to Haifa. We went there. We came from the rain in the drop, of the drop and whatever. We came from the war situation. That kibbutz was even poor, but a lot of people were there who get parcels from the States. We personally, was bad. That didn't pan out. That's kind of a supervision he should have had over the cows. The cow, how do you say, the refet, and a supervisor. He was to be oversee it. I didn't pan out too well. The kibbutz was even poorer than the other one, so I was hungry while I was pregnant for my second daughter. So then the kibbutz left for that place where we originally would follow them. We didn't. We remained in the grounds. And it was poverty galore. We lived in a little shack. There was no water, nothing. So he erected made some pipes, and there was a lot of people coming from the illegal immigrants. But immigrants, they came from Europe, and they settled there in that place. We lived there for a short while, and he had a job, and he had an accident, and whatever. We lived there. It was not hungry, and it was all my weight I gained, I lost there. We had opportunity to go back to Holland, and it was 5 years later, in 1953. He went to 52 with our eldest daughter, back to Israel, to Holland, where he had a cousin who took us in, and I left a couple of months later, in 1953, January 53, left Israel for Holland. In the meantime, in 50, when our youngest daughter was born, there was a fear of polio was rampant there. Scared that she would get it. Lucky I was at that time. She didn't get it. It was not a happy situation at that time where we lived in. No, it was poor, and we lived as gypsies. No electric light, nothing. Okay, in January 53, went to Holland, lived for a short while, 8 or 9 months with his cousin together. Then somebody from the Jewish agency there supplied us with it, because it was very bad, very hard to get living quarters in Holland. Even, you know, it was bad. She supplied us. Was very helpful. The woman was very helpful over the years till we arrived here, and he had a job, and the kids went to school, and I did some cleaning to make a couple of guilders. And then the woman I was with in the camp together, not together, but we knew each other. She just lived across in the same street. One day I got to know her, and she said, you know what, I'm going to make a plan, I'm going to the States. But she wanted to go first to Canada, because that was not that easy at that time. And then I came home one day. I lost the baby in the meantime. I had a son, and died by birth. And then all in all the memories and everything else, I said to him, you know what, why don't you go to Canada? I don't want to be here, to be surrounded by memories here and there and everywhere. And then in April 58, well, it didn't so easy. In 57 we applied by the Canadian Embassy in Den Haag. We had an immigration officer. who interviewed us, and asked if we had, one of the questions was, did you immigrate before? So he looked at me, I looked at, I said, yes. Where were you before? He said, we were in Israel. And then all of a sudden, he just changed his attitude and became obnoxious. He became so obnoxious, and he yelled the questions at us that we were totally intimidated like anything else. We didn't need that. That was an embassy official from Canada in The Hague. But that time we told him too I was pregnant, so we had to postpone. We wanted to postpone. A year later, he came back from other immigration official, and he was the nicest guy who can ever, because we signed the other one. We were hoping we couldn't get him. He was the nicest guy I ever met. He was naturally asking, where's the baby, or whatever. That he was very, very sensitive and asking, so we told him it was fine. So that's why we went to Canada. And I'm glad we ever did. And we more or less made a living here. We worked hard, and we made a living, and we are pretty satisfied. I think what we have now, our lives. That's what I want to say.
Do you think it's fair that Fritz Phillips was accused of cooperating
No,
with the Germans?
it definitely was not fair. To a certain extent he had to cooperate. Look, like Schindler had to cooperate too sometimes. Even if he wanted to help us, he had to cooperate in a certain extent, because if he would say, I do it just, and I make materials, even, yeah, by the way, the materials what we were working on were inferior and were not actually, they didn't do the German army any good. They were not effective, but they were made in such a way they were not much use. So if you would told him that, he would himself be killed. No, it's not fair. Definitely not. That's whatever I say. I promote that because of the Phillips Group, I'm and my other camp inmates are alive today.
You told me that when we talked before this interview that in effect you felt you had a life sentence. These experiences were...
Yeah, they are, because there is always, sometimes daily, sometimes not. My husband and I, we talk, there is an occurrence, like the one, I was 2 or 3 years ago visiting our daughter in Kingston. I came back by via, and from Toronto to Oakville, and I was sitting, just my business. There comes a snot-nosed from a conductor and tells me, I have to leave my seat. I said, why? He said, this is reserved. I said, well, there's no reserve sign on it. Authority doesn't go well with me, unfortunately, after all that. And I just told him, I said, well, I so don't see any reserve seat, so I don't see why I should leave. He became quite obnoxious and insultive, and he probably didn't like the way I talked to him. He's not used to elderly women maybe talking to him what it is, so he didn't like that. And later on he threatened to, if I want to, I'm here, I can just carry you off that train, and you better listen. And he told the other one, you watch that woman, because otherwise she goes off that train. And that was a horrible, horrible, horrible experience. My husband picked me up here from Oakville, and I came crying out of the train. I said, just take it easy, don't do. And he was just, is she a woman? Is she your wife? Well, I don't want that woman. And he was so abusive and insulting. It brought me back like authority. I couldn't do anything. I was helpless. I was sitting beside English guys who were here on holiday and just shook their head, and they said, I've never seen that before. I put my complaint into VIA and got nowhere. Got a lousy letter, and that is all what they did. One of the experience, what brought you back, that whatever you do, sometimes the Kingston affair with those women, being okay, whatever women they are, being searched and being naked in the cell there, brought back again the experience that I had been nude and more or less inspected by the Germans. There are little tidbits. In the beginning, when I was going by GO train, there was a factory, whatever is import credit, and the smokestack, it has smoked. It's not that any bad anymore, but I couldn't see that smokestack there, belching the smoke from there. It is a lifelong sentence. I mean, I bring it all forward and everything, but I mean, you bury it through the dirty dredge of life or whatever you're living, the normal, it's buried naturally. It shouldn't be on the surface every time, because then I go in the mental institution in Clarkson. But as I said, we maintain a semblance of normalcy. I had a job, and we had a job, and we lived our normal life, but there are occasions that you be just thrown like the train, or he'll tell you too from his experience, that you'll be thrown right back where you're for, and then there is no way out. It is a lifeline, it's a sentence for life. Nobody human being can do that to another one. But look at abused kids, the same thing. Everybody has a scar. And the brain is nice, it's like a wound who's healing, but underneath it's still going on. And we will have that for the rest of our life. Suspicion and no for authority, forget. Next time if we do, he can scream, he can carry me screaming off the bus, because I won't take it. But that's it. That's one of the things, personally for me, the way and the older I get, more sensitive and worse it gets.
Why did you choose to share your story with not only us, but other groups that you've spoken to?
I'll tell you, it was not on my own initiative. Sometimes I'm not that initiative. I get schlepped in by my husband. He did it, and I thought it was a good idea. Why not? What you learn in history books is just that. Even our vet said that yesterday, when we talked, she very sensitive. She said, when you learn it from a history book, it's nothing. Like you learn from the war, from the South and the North in the States, or here in Canada. It's your real people who have experienced that. Well, okay, we're almost near the end, I think, of telling the story. It's quite, because even a couple of days after you left.
So this isn't easy for you
no,
to do?
No, definitely not. It's tearing up all the dirt and all the thoughts and everything, and you're back again. That's why I decided to do it too. There is a day again in April, May, I think, in Oise or something, where the students coming from the school and are speaking in April, May. We are going there too, but then it's a very brief story. I can just half an hour, 50 minutes, I can over it, it isn't too bad. But this in-depth one, but was it just once, and that's why I wanted to do the in-depth one.
I would like to thank you very much for sharing your story with us today. And I understand that you have some documents and pictures that we will show. Mm-hmm. And thank you very much for telling us your story today.
These are my parents. This picture was taken as an ID card for postponing being deported during the war in Holland. It was taken around in the middle of August 1942. My father, mother, and myself. Oh, not bad. This document was sent to me by the Dutch Red Cross, telling me all the dates where I have been in the camp. I have no idea if I requested it or not. The letter is dated 1955. But all the data where I have been in Germany. This letter was written by two relatives outside the camp of Vught in the Netherlands. At the beginning they were allowed to write to, this is stationery supplied by the camp, and they were allowed to write to relatives or friends outside the camp. Later on it was revoked. This is the copy in German. That is Camp Vught Stationary. This picture was taken in Sweden. We were, while we were recovering, and there was as a treat to have a sightseeing tour of the harbor of Göteborg in Sweden. Part of our group, there is another boat, it has another part of the women. That's what I have. 1945. This was by my arrival in Sweden, and it was around, I would say, April 1945, with my hair barely growing, but growing nevertheless. Our arrival in Sweden in the town of Malmö. Oh, it was speaks for itself, the Allied Expedition card, DP index card. What was issued to me. I think the scan means maybe Scandinavia, yeah. This was my card, the identity card, on arriving in the government of Palestine in February 1948, issued by the British and the Israelis. That's the picture. This is pictures of the gravestone of my mother in the cemetery of Holland. My daughter is standing in front of that while visiting a couple of years ago. And beside there is the gravestone of my grandmother, who died in 1941. There's a picture of the gravestone. That's all what's left on pictures from my grandparents. In May 1990, we had a reunion of our Philips group, and I went to Holland, and this is one of the pictures. We were united with most of the women. Not all of them attended the meeting, and there was naturally a lot of memories. And the third of the right, or a third of the left, is Engineer Fritz Philips, who was originating in our Philips group and the factory in Vught. The first on the left is his wife. This is the other side of the letter we showed earlier, for prisoners or inmates were allowed to send to relatives. The other side, what is the printed is in English is your return address and prisoner so and so, number so and so. That's the number they had to wear on their coat, and what block they were, what barrack they were, and the other was KL. Herzogenbusch is the name close by Vught, and KL means concentration camp. Translated in German means concentration lager, Herzogenbusch, and Schutzhäftling means prisoner.